Alright guys, so the notes for today are Chapter 12, Section 3. Again, it's Congress in action, but today we're going to be talking about how a bill becomes a law, the steps it goes through in Congress to become a law. So here are some objectives for Section 3. Also, key terms. You'll need to refer back to these for your test. There's 2 slides of key terms. Some of them we are going to write down, the more important ones. What steps does a successful bill follow as it moves through the House? We're going to do an assignment with that after these notes. I don't expect you to know that until after we learn about how a bill becomes a law. All right, so your first heading is called the first steps. And this was really about how does the bill even become started. So most bills are drafted in the executive branch. Remember, that's the president. Or it can be special interest groups. And all of that's done before being presented to members of Congress. So the bill's drafted by the executive branch or special interest groups before it's ever presented to Congress. So once one member of Congress is approached with a bill, members often try to get support or co-sponsors from other members of Congress before introducing a proposed bill. They want other people to be supporting it before they introduce it because there's a better chance of it being passed. There's one stipulation. All tax bills must begin in the House. The Senate cannot create a tax bill. All tax bills must begin in the House. So that is how tax bills are created. That's the one thing that you cannot start in the Senate. That can only be started in the House. House members introduce bills by dropping them into a hopper on the clerk's desk, which we're not going to write that down, but they're just dropped off at the clerk's desk, and that is how they get introduced. Alright guys, so bear with me. My pen just quit working, so I'm having to use my finger to do this. So if I have to write any words, it might look a little messy. So your next heading is Bills and Resolutions. So public bills are measures, and really measures, like I said, I'm writing with my finger, sorry. Measures are just bills that apply to the nation as a whole. So that's a public bill because it applies to the whole United States. The opposite of that is a private bill. And that applies to certain persons or places. So certain people or groups of people or certain places in the United States. It's not for the entire United States. So joint resolutions are special measures that have the force of the law. So that's the difference there. All right, so same heading, bills and resolutions continued. So concurrent resolutions do not have the force of the law. So concurrent means at the same time. So same time. They are used when both the House and Senate want to state a position on the issue. So a concurrent resolution is used when both the House and Senate want to state a position on the same issue. Another kind of resolution is called a simple resolution, and they are used by each House, the House of Representatives, each chamber, the House and the Senate, to adopt or amend rules in the House or the Senate. So a rider is something that's a little tricky. So a rider is a provision tacked on to an unrelated bill. And the reason that members of the Senate or members of the House will tack on this rider that doesn't have anything to do with the actual bill being passed is because if they were to create it as its own bill, it more than likely would not be passed. So they'll tack on this little rider to a bill that's for sure going to be passed. For example, an appropriations bill, those are usually always passed. So they'll tack on this little provision called a rider. That way it is more than likely to be passed than if it were to try to be a bill on its own, then it more than likely wouldn't get passed. So it's kind of a loophole to get things passed that are maybe unpopular by tacking it onto a bill that they know will pass. All right, so the next step is the first reading. So that's the next step. After being introduced to the House or the Senate, the first reading is what happens next. So each bill is numbered by the clerk because they dropped it off in the basket at the clerk's desk. So each bill is numbered, given a short title summarizing its contents, and then it's entered into the official record. So after the first reading, after all that happens, the bill is assigned to a committee. Remember, in the last section, we talked about how they'll be assigned to the committees. If it's a bill about farming, then it's going to be assigned to the Committee on Agriculture. So it'll be assigned to the committee that's most appropriate to deal with the contents of the bill. So now the bill's been read, it's had its first reading, and now it goes into committee. So that's our next heading, the bill in committee. So it looks familiar, it should. This picture was part of your focus question for today. So once it goes to committee, what happens? So though not mentioned in the Constitution, right? So committees are not mentioned in the Constitution. Committees play an essential role by filtering the many bills submitted to Congress, but they're not mentioned in the Constitution. So you can look at the picture here that I had be your focus question for today. You can see that at this time, there were 7,558 bills introduced. 1,121 were reported by committee, meaning that they could go on to be voted on. 958 were passed by one chamber, either the House or the Senate, whoever introduced it usually. And then only 479 bills on average are passed by both chambers. And they have to be passed by both chambers to become a bill. After it's passed by both chambers, we'll talk about that later. So this is the picture you did for your focus question. So what happens here, all of this that I just kind of circled and talked about, this is called pigeonholed. So most bills are pigeonholed, which means that they die in the committee. I know it seems kind of weird that you say you kill a bill or the bill dies, but that is the correct terminology that is used. So most bills are pigeonholed in the committees. They are left in the committees. And that means that they die in the committee. They never are passed by a chamber. They're never reported by the committee to go to the House floor or the Senate floor. So they die. All right, so same heading, the bill in committee continued. So there is a way to get around that pigeonhole scenario, and that's called a discharge petition. And that lets a House member, whether it's the Senate or the House of Representatives, it lets the members force a bill that has stayed in committee for 30 days onto the floor for a debate. So they can debate on the vote. But this petition has to be signed. It must be signed by a majority of the members. If it's not signed by the majority of the members, then the discharge petition can't be forced. It can't force the bill. So that's one way around the pigeonhole. But the hard part is getting the majority of the members to sign onto the bill. All right, next heading is a committee at work. So we've talked a little about this in section 2. The committees refer bills to one of their subcommittees. And remember, we talked about the subcommittees are where they research. Bear with me, I'm writing with my finger. Research and review the bill or the proposed bill. And to be able to research and review the proposed bill, there's lots of different ways that the committees can do that. The committees can have public hearings to gather data and hear testimony. And those are held for key measures. Key measures meaning important measures, important bills that need to be passed or are important to the public, the nation as a whole. So let's scroll down just a little bit. Sometimes they'll even take trips to research a bill. If it's something that they need to see in person, they'll do that as well. So our next heading is committee actions. So what can the committees do? What are their actions? Are your next heading. So a committee can. So these are all the things. We're not going to write them all, but we're going to write a few of the important ones. So what can a committee do? It can report a bill with a do pass recommendation. So once it leaves the committee, they can say do pass, which means they think it should pass once it reaches the House floor for a vote. The big one we just talked about a minute ago is they can pigeonhole the bill and kill it. The committee has the authority to do that. They can also report an amended version of the bill. They can change some things. Remember, amend means to change something. So they can change some parts of the bill and then try to send it to the House floor after there's been some changes made. They can also, as they can report with a do pass recommendation, they can report a bill with a do not pass recommendation. So they can still let it leave the committee, but they can recommend that it does not pass. They can also create their own bill. So the committee can report a committee bill, so a bill that they've created on the same topic, as a substitute for the bill that it was referred. So they can completely change it to something they think's better and substitute it in for the actual bill that was submitted. So this slide's about congressional staffers. So it's just people who work for members of Congress in the Senate and the House. So more than 2,500 people serve on congressional committees, offering expert advice on the content, the politics associated with various bills, and their hard work there is the research and presenting information on issues to Congress. All right, so up next is scheduling a floor debate. So if the bill actually makes it out of the committee and the committee sends it to the House floor, then it has to be scheduled for a floor debate. So if a bill is reported by a standing committee, it must be placed on one of the 5 House calendars before it comes up for a floor debate. So it has to go to the calendar first before it can come to the floor. It can't just say, the committee can't just come in to the House of Representatives and say, okay, today we're going to vote on this bill or we're going to debate on this bill. It has to be put on the calendar, and then it can be allowed to come up for floor debate. So then, this is still not even the whole chamber, whether it be the House or the Senate voting. This is strictly just debating on this bill. So then the Rules Committee, which we talked about in Section 2, must then grant a rule to a bill, setting a time for it to appear on the floor. So the Rules Committee has some power there, because if they do not grant the rule, the committee kills the bill. The Rules Committee kills the bill. And special rules, they can put special rules on the bill to limit the debate, limit the time of the debate, limit how many people can debate. So the Rules Committee can put a lot of things on there that can change. come back for a part 2.